going to be working with this ebook, which you should all have a copy of. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the most difficult part of the screenplay, which is Act 2, Part 2. Brief review, for those of you, is that we have a wonderful technique in which, by asking four probing questions, we can outline a screenplay. So we use character revelation to create an original plot. I kind of like that idea because it's kind of like there's a blog post this week. I'm a aspiring tango dancer, and I was talked into doing a performance at one of the practicas at one of the dance studios that I dance at, and so I did this tango with my teacher, and it helped me tremendously with my writing, actually learning how to tango, because as a woman, your role in tango is to follow. And again, there are all these values that we give to things that, following is not as important as leading, and I'm here to tell you that following is just as important as leading. But in the same way, we tend to denigrate plot, we build up plot and we denigrate character. And the four magic questions are kind of like getting the dance to work together, where both the plot and the character are dancing together, creating a better dance as opposed to a stronger or a weaker partner. So I want you to hold that in mind, and if you're interested, my blog is Marilyn's Movie Candy. I being a Google, what do they call it? I'm a Google addict, so I have no idea what the URL is. I think it's marylandsmoviecandy.blogspot.com. I think that's how to go, but I go through Google. And anyway, if you want to watch me do the tango, which is very funny and will amuse you, I suggest it. But keep in mind the idea that what we're doing is we're teaching ourselves, us writers, how to do a better dance, and that's a great way to work with the ideas behind the four magic questions. I always say with writing that you can either struggle or dance, and that you really only have two options, because all writing and probably everything else that we do has to exist in relationship. You don't do very many things in a vacuum, and certainly writing is not one of them. Please forgive this ugly cord. I'm not sure what to do with it, so I'm going to kind of make it just say this is my accessory. Thank you. All right, now before we get started, I think that we still have room for a couple of questions, so if you're interested, you can go to www.screenwritermagic.com. There's also more information about our books there. And if you need to reach us, remember I'm a coach, and I do occasionally take on new clients, and we do have classes starting in the fall that we have I think we have 2 places left. You can call our office at 212-600-1111. That's, oh, I misspoke. Luckily, I don't do my own marketing. 212-600-1115. Let me say that again correctly. It's 212-600-1115. Okay, so I hope everybody is ready to go. And I'm going to do a brief review, and then we're going to talk about Act 2, Part 2. And then I'm going to answer all your questions, so bear with me. Now, we've talked about the four magic questions as a system where we are able to get the entire outline of a screenplay by asking 4 specific questions. Pretty cool. I've gotten so many inquiries this week. I want to say that the four magic question kind of sits on the Horowitz system, which is my writing system, which is contained in my book, How to Write a Screenplay in 10 Weeks. So for those of you who don't know what to buy first, the answer is, hopefully, if you can invest in yourself, you'll buy the How to Write a Four Magic Questions kit, which will help you get started. And then the How to Write a Screenplay in 10 Weeks book and soon-to-be kit will help you actually execute what you've created in these early stages. So I want to be clear about that. You start with the four magic questions, and then you move on. Act 1, Act 2, Part 1, Act 2, Part 2, and Act 3 is the innovation in the four magic questions. The traditional method of thinking about screenwriting is that there are 3 acts, Acts 1, 2, and 3, and that if we use a model movie of 120 pages, Act 1 is roughly 30 pages, Act 2 is 60 pages, and Act 3 is 30 pages. what I did was I broke Act 2 into 2 equal-length parts. So we now had 4, I'm holding up 10 fingers, but we had 4 equal-length parts, and by applying certain questions to them, for some reason, foolproof, like magic, we don't know why, we were able to suddenly intuit a whole screenplay plot that was both original and interesting. So, the goal here was to take away the mystery of structure, because what I was finding with my writers was that, or my students I should say, is that we were spending far too much time agonizing over plot and not worrying about whether or not it was a good one. I hope I'm resonating with you. And there's some statistic about how there's 60,000 unsold screenplays in the Writers Guild vaults, and I think there's probably a reason, and I hate to say it, the reason is that they're just not good enough. And what that means is one of 2 things, or probably both things, which is that the characterizations are not interesting or realistic enough, and further, that the plots aren't any good. Just because you can push something into the 3-act structure does not mean it's going to be an effective story. So we're going to work on that. Now, the other fun thing about my writing system, and I'm going to ask for a paper towel or a napkin because it's very hot in here and I'm perspiring, and I don't want to do what does Bill Hurt do in broadcast news. I don't want to do the flop sweat thing. So let's begin. Now, the review is Act 1 is answered by asking the question, what is the main character's dream? Now, of course, we also do this for the villain, but we're going to focus on the hero tonight because otherwise it's going to get a little too complicated. What I've said is that if we can find out what the main character's dream is, and again, our example of Witness is that his dream is to be a good cop, we can then infer Act 3. And remember, people are always asking me whether they need to know the ending of their movie before they write it, and I am always saying, and I will say it again, because teachers do repeat themselves, that yes, you don't need to worry about knowing your ending because the ending is inferred by the beginning. That is, the character will either realize his or her dream, they will forfeit his or her dream, as is the case in The Godfather, or they will come up with a new dream, as in the case of Garden State, which is a film we use to teach this new adventure idea that I like. Now, having said that, hopefully you've begun to trust me after 3 seminars, and you understand that once you know Act 1, without getting too involved with Act 3, you can take the first 2 30-minute sections of your film and put them aside. Now that leaves us with an hour of film to contend with, which is half as much as we had 30 seconds ago. And remember how we discussed that Act 1 and Act 2 Part 1 are intimately related because Act 1 is often the main character's dream, and then Act 2 Part 1 becomes the nightmare. And this also can be exactly in the reverse. So in the case of Garden State, Act 1 is obviously his nightmare, and Act 2 Part 1 becomes his dream because he meets the girl. In Witness, Act 1 is his dream because he is being a good cop and catching the bad guys. And Act 2 Part 1 is clearly his nightmare because now he is shot, stuck, and unable to pursue the bad guys. So the determination I need you to make before we go forward is which rhythm are you going to use for the screenplay that you're writing? Is Act 1 the dream, and Act 2 Part 1 is the nightmare, or is Act 2 Part 1 the dream, and Act 1 is the nightmare? That's our question. So once we answer that, and again, you know, everything that we do, because you're plotting, can be changed, can be flipped. That leaves us now, we've removed now another 30-minute section, and now we're left with a 30-minute or a 30-page section, Act 2, Part 2, which is the most difficult part to write, but I think you can appreciate that it's certainly a lot less difficult if it's the only thing that we have to concentrate on. So I'm going to let that sink in for a minute, okay? So really, now what's important to know about Act 2, Part 2 is that it's impossible when you're creating a story to get here to this part of the act by working your way methodically through Act 1, Act 2, Part 1, and Act 3. And the reason for this is I've discovered after working on so many screenplays that Act 1 and Act 3 relate to each other because one is the dream and the other is the resolution of the dream, forfeiture of the dream, or a new adventure. And that Act 2 is really about something else.